on the clear, mild evening of Thursday, October 17, 2002, in Anápolis, Goiás. 27-year-old Carlos Eduardo Mendes and his 24-year-old fiancée, Mariana Alves Santos, attended a birthday party at a friend's country home in the rural outskirts of the city. The couple had told their families they would be back around 2 a.m. Carlos, a manager at a local supermarket chain, had work the next day, and Mariana, a recent pedagogy graduate, had a 9 a.m. job interview at a private school. According to witnesses at the party, Carlos and Mariana said their goodbyes around 11:40 p.m., explaining they needed to leave. They had arrived in Carlos's red 1998 Volkswagen Gol. The single security camera at the entrance of the property captured their vehicle leaving at 11:47 p.m., with Carlos driving and Mariana in the passenger seat. The party was held at Chácara Vista Alegre, a property owned by Ricardo Gonçalves, located about 18 kilometers from the center of Anápolis in an area known as Vale das Paineiras. Access to the estate was via a poorly maintained dirt road flanked by rural properties and stretches with no public lighting, surrounded by cattle farms, corn and soybean fields, and small leisure ranches. The first hint of trouble came the next morning. At 8:25 a.m., Carlos's mother, Claudia Mendes, tried calling her son after realizing he hadn't come home. His recently purchased Nokia phone was turned off. Worried, she called Mariana's home and was informed by Mariana's mother, Dona Conceição, that her daughter hadn't returned either. Initially, the families thought the couple might have stayed over at a friend's house without letting them know, something they had never done before. By 12:30 p.m., after Carlos failed to show up for work and Mariana missed her job interview, the families began a frantic search. They called hospitals, close friends, and drove the route the couple should have taken home from the party. At 6 p.m., with no news, Carlos's parents filed a missing persons report with the Anápolis Civil Police. They were about to get married. They had already set the date for February 2003. They had just finished furnishing the apartment where they were going to live. "It makes no sense. They just vanished into thin air," declared Sebastián Alves, Mariana's father, in his initial statement to the police. The case gained urgency when authorities discovered that, just a week earlier, the couple had withdrawn $7,800 from their savings to buy appliances for their future home. This information raised the initial hypothesis that they might have been victims of a robbery homicide. In 2002, the region where they disappeared had alarming rates of rural violence. Anápolis, the second-largest city in Goiás, was experiencing an economic boom, which had also led to a spike in crime. Detective Mauro Rezende, in charge of the case, mobilized teams to search the road and nearby properties. In the following days, sniffer dogs were brought in, and a helicopter conducted flyovers of the densest wooded areas. Not a single trace of the car or the couple was found. It was as if they had evaporated. There were no skid marks on the road, no signs of an accident, no indication of violence. The only record we had was the image of them leaving the party, the detective explained at a press conference 5 days after the disappearance. The families distributed posters with the couple's photos throughout the region, appeared on local radio programs, and hired a private investigator, former police officer Arnaldo Queiroz, to assist in the search. Meanwhile, the civil police profiled the victims and explored possible motives. The investigation initially focused on 3 main theories: an accident on the dirt road that could have sent the vehicle into an area of low visibility, a robbery homicide, given the money the couple had recently withdrawn, and the unlikely but not dismissed possibility of a voluntary disappearance. For the first 30 days, every property within a 25-kilometer radius of the party was inspected. Ponds, wells, forests, and ravines were checked for any sign of the vehicle or the couple. We went through it with a fine-tooth comb, meter by meter. We spoke with every resident, every farm worker. Someone had to have seen something, investigator Paulo Enrique Silva reported. In December 2002, the police received their first seemingly promising lead. A gas station attendant on the BR-153 highway, about 32 kilometers from the party, reported seeing a red Gol parked on the shoulder around midnight on the night of the disappearance, with a man standing beside it talking on a cell phone. However, when shown photographs, the attendant could not definitively identify the man as Carlos. The families spared no expense hiring a private team of divers to check deeper reservoirs and dams. They consulted spiritualists and psychics, desperate for any direction. Sebastian Alves even sold his small rural property to finance the search and hire specialists. In March 2003, a report surfaced that Carlos's red Gol had been seen in Aruana, a town on the banks of the Araguaia River, about 310 kilometers from Anápolis. A police team was dispatched, but the information proved to be false, the first of many false alarms that would consume resources and fuel false hopes over the years. The private investigator, Arnaldo Queiroz, delved into the couple's past, searching for any enemies or conflicts. He discovered that 3 years prior, Carlos had testified against a former co-worker in a case of merchandise theft, which led to the man's imprisonment. This individual, Rogerio Campos, had served his sentence and was released in July 2002, 3 months before the disappearance, Queiroz noted in his report. Police located Campos, who had a solid alibi with multiple witnesses confirming he was in another city on the night in question. The investigation also scrutinized the party's guest list. All 47 attendees were interviewed, some more than once. A few mentioned that Carlos had a brief argument with an unidentified man, but no one could provide precise details about the man or the nature of the disagreement. In August 2003, an anonymous tip claimed the couple had been ambushed on the dirt road and their bodies were buried on a specific property. An operation was mounted with excavators and sniffer dogs, but nothing was found. The tip was classified as a hoax, a pattern that would repeat itself throughout the investigation. In 2004, the case gained national attention when it was featured on the popular television show, Linha Direita. Dozens of calls came in after the broadcast, but none provided concrete information. One caller claimed to have seen the couple living under false identities in Palmas, Tocantins. Local police investigated and found a couple who looked similar, but it was not Carlos and Mariana. In 2005, a new police chief, Alexander Lorenzo, officially reopened the case and assigned a task force. They requested phone records from the time, which had not been properly analyzed before, and re-interviewed key witnesses. A crucial detail emerged from the phone records. Carlos's cell phone had been used at 12:32 a.m. that night, about 45 minutes after leaving the party, to make a call lasting only 8 seconds to an unidentified number. The service provider could only confirm the phone was in a rural area of Anápolis at the time of the call. This was the last recorded activity from Carlos's phone. As time passed, active searches were gradually scaled back, but the case remained open. The families never gave up, keeping the couple's memory alive with annual masses and constantly renewing the missing persons posters around the city. In 2008, a surprising turn of events occurred when Juliano Ferreira, one of the party guests, came forward with new information. He claimed he had seen Carlos in a heated conversation with Leonel Brito, a local landowner known for land disputes. Ferreira said he hadn't mentioned it before for fear of retaliation, as Brito had a reputation for being violent and influential. They were arguing about a fence. Carlos mentioned something about an incorrect measurement, and Leonel seemed very angry, Ferreira stated in his new testimony. Police questioned Leonel Brito, who vehemently denied any involvement and claimed he didn't even know the couple. Brito provided a solid alibi, proving he was at a cattle auction in another city that night, with numerous witnesses to corroborate his story. In 2010, Mariana's family received an anonymous letter, postmarked from northern Goiás, claiming the couple had been victims of a settling of scores related to gambling debts. The letter alleged that Carlos owed money to loan sharks. A deep dive into Carlos's finances found no evidence of significant debt or any involvement in gambling. Carlos was extremely organized with his finances, his mother Claudia argued. He was saving for the wedding. This story of debt makes no sense. In 2011, nearly a decade after the disappearance, investigators applied new technologies. Satellite images of the region from 2003 onward were analyzed for any ground disturbances that could indicate digging. 17 points of interest were identified, but searches yielded nothing. Then in 2013, the case took a dramatic turn. Jorge Medeiros, a farmhand in the region, gave a deathbed confession. Suffering from terminal cancer, he told a priest he had helped hide bodies in the rural area of Anápolis. The confession was relayed to the police by Medeiros's family, but he passed away before he could be formally questioned. The details were hazy. He had mentioned a couple, an abandoned water tank, and that he had acted on his boss's orders. This imprecise but powerful information gave the investigation a new direction. In 2015, the Goiás Civil Police's Missing Persons Unit took over the case. Detective Amanda Ferreira, a specialist in cold cases, re-examined all the evidence and decided to focus on Jorge Medeiros's confession. We remapped all the rural properties within a 50-kilometer radius of the party that had abandoned water reservoirs. This time, we used drones equipped with thermal cameras and metal detectors to cover hard-to-reach areas, Detective Ferreira explained. In July 2016, the team identified a particularly interesting property, the Horizonte farm, located about 22 kilometers from the party. The farm had changed hands 3 times since 2002. At the back of the property, there was an old, partially buried concrete water tank, which had been decommissioned years earlier. The current owner, who had bought the farm in 2013, was unaware of the abandoned structures on the remote edges of his land. When presented with the police's suspicions, he cooperated fully, even authorizing a search of the property. The search led them to a structure all but swallowed by the wilderness, a place so remote and overgrown with dense vegetation that the new landowners had forgotten it even existed. As criminal expert Antonio Souza reported, it was the kind of place one would only find if they knew the land intimately, or if they were searching for that exact spot. In August of 2016, a team of civil police, criminal experts, and forensic archaeologists began to excavate the site. The old water tank, roughly 3 meters in diameter and 2.5 meters deep, had been partially filled with rubble and earth over the years. The meticulous work took weeks, with each layer of soil carefully removed and sifted for clues. Then on March 12, 2017, after 7 months of intermittent digging at the Horizonte farm, the team found the first concrete signs. They unearthed fragments of fabric, an oxidized zipper, and what appeared to be the remnants of a leather belt. These items were discovered nearly 2 meters down, buried beneath layers of debris, soil, and decomposed vegetation. When we found the fabric fragments, we knew we were on the right path, declared forensic expert Dr. Roberta Campos. Preservation was minimal due to the time and conditions, but it was still crucial evidence. In the weeks that followed, using more precise equipment and even greater care, the team recovered human skeletal remains, including 2 partially preserved skulls and several long bones. The remains were carefully collected and sent to the Forensic Medical Institute in Goiânia for anthropological analysis and identification. A preliminary examination confirmed the remains belonged to one man and one woman, with age estimates consistent with those of Carlos and Mariana. The height calculated from the long bones also matched that of the missing couple. Among the remains, they found metal fragments of a watch, which the families identified as being similar to the one Carlos wore. They also found a small, heart-shaped gold pendant, which Mariana's mother recognized immediately as a gift she had given her daughter. On April 27, 2017, DNA tests officially confirmed that the remains belonged to Carlos Eduardo Mendez and Mariana Alves Santos, finally ending 15 years of anguish and uncertainty for their families. "We can finally give our children a dignified burial," said Mariana's mother, Conceição, her voice thick with emotion. "The pain never goes away, but at least now, we know what happened." The forensic examinations revealed more. Both skulls showed fractures consistent with blows from a blunt object, indicating homicide. No bullets or firearm marks were found, suggesting the couple had been bludgeoned to death. With the bodies identified, the investigation shifted its focus. Who committed this crime, and why? Detective Amanda Ferreira reopened every file, re-examining all the statements collected over the years through a new lens. A crucial piece of information surfaced. Back in 2002, the Horizonte farm had belonged to Ernesto Brito, the brother of Leonel Brito, the very same rancher who, according to a late witness statement, had argued with Carlos at the party. While Leonel had an alibi for the night of the disappearance, his brother Ernesto did not. "We re-examined the attendance records for the cattle auction in Goiânia," the detective explained. "We confirmed that only Leonel was there. Ernesto, who rarely appeared at social events, had no verifiable alibi for that night." Police soon discovered a motive. Carlos, who worked as a supermarket manager, had recently been negotiating to buy farm products directly from small-scale producers, including one from a property neighboring the Horizonte farm. This move had displeased the Brito brothers, who informally controlled the region's agricultural trade, acting as powerful middlemen. Carlos was helping small farmers sell directly to the supermarket, a former supermarket employee reported. He was cutting out the brokers and increasing the farmers' profits. This directly impacted the Brito's business. In June of 2017, police located Ernesto Brito, who was living a reclusive life on a small property in the state of Tocantins. Confronted with the evidence, he initially denied any involvement. But after 12 hours of interrogation, he confessed. According to his confession, on the night of October 17, 2002, he and two of his farmhands intercepted Carlos's car on a dirt road. The initial intention, Ernesto claimed, was merely to scare the young man, to warn him not to interfere in their business. But the situation spiraled into fatal violence. "Carlos fought back," Ernesto stated coldly. "There was a struggle. One of my men hit him with an iron bar. The girl, she started screaming, panicked. We couldn't leave any witnesses." According to the confession, the bodies were temporarily hidden in the woods and, 2 days later, moved to the disused water tank at the back of the Horizonte farm. The car was taken to a shed on the property, dismantled, and its parts sold off to scrapyards in neighboring towns. Ernesto Brito, then 68, was arrested and indicted for double homicide and concealment of a body. The two former employees he named, Josias Silva and Manuel Neco Cordero, were also located and arrested. In his deposition, Josias confirmed Ernesto's version of events, adding details that corroborated the crime's dynamics. Manuel, however, had died in 2011 in a work accident on a farm in Mato Grosso. In August 2017, after exhumation and further forensic analysis, it was proven that both Carlos and Mariana had been struck multiple times in the head, with a heavy cylindrical object, consistent with an iron bar. Carlos also had defensive fractures on his arms, a clear sign he had tried to fight off his attackers. The trial of Ernesto Brito and Josias Silva took place in March 20. Ernesto, considered the mastermind, was sentenced to 42 years in prison for double homicide and concealment of a body. Josias received a 36-year sentence for the same crimes. Ernesto's brother, Lionel, though not formally charged with direct involvement in the murders, was investigated for obstruction of justice and witness intimidation, and was later sentenced to 4 years in prison. The case ignited a nationwide discussion about the influence of parallel powers in rural Brazil, and how economic conflicts can escalate to extreme violence. It also exposed flaws in the initial investigation, which had failed to adequately explore the connections between the victim and powerful local ranchers. In April 2018, after all legal proceedings were concluded, the remains of Carlos and Mariana were finally laid to rest in a cemetery in Anápolis. The ceremony brought together hundreds of people, including local authorities and human rights representatives. 15 years of searching, of uncertainty, of hope that never died, said Sebastián Alves, Mariana's father, at the funeral. Now they can rest in peace, and so can we. The families of Carlos and Mariana went on to create the Carlos and Mariana Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to assisting in the search for missing persons and offering psychological support to families living in the anguish of uncertainty. The case of the couple from the water tank, as CM became known, continues to be studied in police academies and law schools across Brazil. A chilling example of investigative perseverance and a testament to the fact that even seemingly perfect crimes can be solved decades later. The stories of cases like these, which scar families forever, resonate with a deep-seated need for truth and resolution. To follow such a story to its conclusion is to bear witness not only to the tragedy, but to the tireless search for justice. The resolution of Carlos and Mariana's case brought about profound changes in Goiás's system for investigating disappearances. In September 20, the state legislature passed the Carlos and Mariana Law, establishing new protocols that included the creation of an integrated database and the mandatory periodic review of cold cases. The law also mandated the creation of a specialized unit for locating the missing, staffed by multidisciplinary teams of police, social workers, psychologists, and data analysts. This unit implemented advanced investigative methods, including the use of drones, satellite imagery, and facial recognition software. The case of Carlos and Mariana exposed grave flaws in our system, stated State Deputy Patricia Vieira, who authored the bill. We cannot bring the couple back, but we can ensure that other families do not endure the same 15 years of agony. The conviction of the Brito brothers also unraveled an extensive network of influence the family wielded over local authorities. Subsequent investigations led by the State Public Prosecutor's Office revealed that Lionel Brito had financed the political campaigns of several regional politicians in exchange for favors, including the dismissal of prior complaints related to land grabbing and threats against small farmers. In 2019, a follow-up investigation codenamed Operation Clean Land resulted in the indictment of 2 former police chiefs, a retired prosecutor, and 3 city councilors for dereliction of duty, passive corruption, and obstruction of justice. At various times, they had all helped to divert the focus of the investigation away from the Brito brothers. This crime would not have gone unpunished for so long if there hadn't been protection from people in positions of power, affirmed Prosecutor Rafael Moraes, who led the operation. The story of Carlos and Mariana also inspired a documentary produced by a streaming platform titled 15 Years of Silence, released in 2020. The film reconstructed the case with powerful testimony from the families, investigators, and prosecutors, achieving international acclaim and drawing global attention to the issue of missing persons in Brazil. The Carlos and Mariana Foundation, created by the victims' families, expanded in the following years, forging partnerships with universities to develop advanced forensic techniques and creating a national support network for the families of the disappeared. By 2025, the foundation had assisted in resolving 76 long-term cases across the country. "We transformed our pain into purpose," explained Claudia Mendez, Carlos's mother and the foundation's president. "Every person located, whether alive or not, represents a family that can finally have answers and begin their process of grief or reunion." In 2021, Ernesto Brito died in prison at the age of 72 from heart complications, having never shown remorse for his crime. Josias Silva, on the other hand, found religion while serving his sentence and began to cooperate with authorities, providing information on other crimes he had witnessed while working for the Britos. The impact of the case extended far beyond the borders of Goiás. In 2022, the National Congress approved the creation of a national system for locating the missing, directly inspired by the model implemented in Goiás after Carlos and Mariana's case. The system integrates data from all Brazilian states and uses artificial intelligence to identify patterns and connections between seemingly isolated cases. The case also brought to light the dark power dynamics of rural Brazil. Academic studies began to analyze how feudal-like power structures persist in certain regions, creating zones where economic might and political influence override the rule of law. The Carlos and Mariana case is emblematic of how rural Brazil still contends with power structures that run parallel to the state, where the law of the strongest prevails, analyzed sociologist Dr. Helena Martins in a 2023 article. For the victims' families, despite the permanent pain, the resolution brought a form of peace. In an interview on the 20th anniversary of the disappearance in 2022, Sebastião Alves, Mariana's father, reflected, "For 15 years we lived in suspension, unable to move forward, always looking back, at every phone call, every opening door, hoping it was them. Now we carry the certainty of their absence. It is painful, but it is a defined burden with clear contours. We know what happened. We know who was responsible. We know where our children are. It is a pain we can live with." The case continues to serve as a benchmark for investigators and as a reminder that even after years of impunity, the truth can emerge. Every year on October 17th, the date of the disappearance, a ceremony is held at the cemetery where Carlos and Mariana are buried, bringing together family, friends, and professionals dedicated to the cause of the disappeared in Brazil. "They are gone," concluded Detective Amanda Ferreira, who led the final phase of the investigation and now coordinates the specialized unit in Goiás. "But their legacy remains alive, in every person found, in every family that receives answers, in every new investigative protocol implemented." The story of Carlos and Mariana, though tragic, has been transformed into a symbol of hope and perseverance for thousands of Brazilian families who still await news of their missing loved ones.